Hi guys, I'm Becca Otis from Five Lines Pottery, and I'm located in Van.
And I'm Ryan Durbin from RD Ceramics, located in Highland Heights, Kentucky.
And welcome to Wheel Talk.
Try to behave.
You'll be fine.
All right, we started. All right,
Hello.
we are back. Becca and I are joined by a guest. Welcome
Hello.
back to Link Henderson from Kentucky Mudworks. I don't know. I need to look this up. I forgot when we were last on. I mean, we pulled up our chat, and that was the last time we were on Skype together. But that was in May of 2021.
Yeah.
Almost 2 years, 3 years from today. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like we had our chat, and then I had a COVID shot, like the earlier that day, and like towards the end of the chat, I was like, and boom, out. I didn't say anything incredibly stupid.
Yeah, it's been a while. We always get comments every now and then that are like, "Oh, I really like that chat you all had with Link, and like the details you all went into, and the like chemical stuff and the sciences. It got a little more technical than we typically do, and it was
Mhm.
nice. And I always every now and then I'll get comments about that. And there was the one like in the last week that was, "Hey, I got questions. Like I want to see if Link can talk more about this stuff like the last time you all had her on." So hey, just good timing. So
Yeah,
welcome back.
yeah. You guys have hit it where there's been a lot of changes since
Oh
we.
yeah. Yep. I've been adding to my list of questions for you as we've been probably especially the last I want to say 9 months or so
Mhm.
for sure, with the materials and all that kind of stuff. So we'll get to that. How do you like to introduce yourself to folks that may not know who you are or what you do?
Oh, I have to do that. Okay. Hi, everybody. Link. I own Kentucky Mudworks in Lexington and Louisville. Have a store in each town. Lexington, we manufacture Kentucky Mudworks clay and glazes, and we also manufacture Dirty Girls pottery tools. And I started Mudworks in 2002, and I think I started making Dirty Girls. I want to say like 2008,
Okay.
2000, something like that. I was trying to look it up, and I was like, I couldn't remember. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
been around a while. I feel like there's
Yeah.
kind of a separation, but when you go to Nsika, I think you all tend to have the branding that are side by side, but maybe your booth is more Dirty Girl Pottery Tools, and then
yeah,
there's always clay there, and there's demos that are clay centric as well as tools.
yeah. It travels well. Like it's in 50 stores, whereas Mudworks products are more regional because they weigh a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think I bought Dirty Girls tools, and I was like, no, I'm the one
Yeah.
started it.
So how do you said you manufacture that out of Lexington as well? All the tools?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I don't think I saw that in because I went to the open house recently, but I don't think is it in, does it have I'm guessing it's got a dedicated room because you don't want the wood
Yeah,
and sanding stuff contaminating.
I got like a room where we do the metal, the trim tools, and then a wood area, and then like an air conditioned area for making the wire tools and the small things and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Is
that's
this
all that blocked off because there's like proprietary machines and stuff like that.
Yeah. Is the staff overlapped? Or do you have separate staff that focuses all on making and fulfillment and all of that for each side of the business?
There is some overlap. I have one person, her name is Leah, and she makes the majority of the Dirty Girls tools or finishes them. We have a CNC company that cuts a lot of the precision items, and then we get them in rough, and she'll process them. And then I do the Dirty Girls trim tools, which are
The
used to be
groovy
groovy.
tools?
Yeah, I purchased that from a friend who started the business and then didn't they didn't go real far with it because I think they just got into doing other life. And I wanted to get into metalworking, so I bought it. And it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy the making trim tools. And so I do all of that. And then I have a couple of my clay makers actually are trained to run the machines in the tool rooms. So say a clay machine is down or waiting on a part or something like that, then one of them will jump on the mill, and cut blades, and the other will get on the press or press the handles and things like that help me out because like I have less and less time. So yeah, there is definitely cross training. There's a lot of that where it works. It's just small.
So like
bit.
what percentage of like making a tool is well, I guess it depends on your tool, your equipment, machinery and stuff, but like what percentage of it is like raw materials coming to you and assemble versus like assembly and labor to whether it's sanding or grinding?
You mean like cost or time?
Like time.
We get basically like the raw materials in, like the steel in raw, and then we process it completely up to the point of heat treat. We do send it out for heat treat because I'm not a metallurgist. And
Heat treat, like making it so it doesn't rust, and is that or
basically turning the steel you're converting the molecules in the steel to something that's tempered and lasts significantly longer. Like, have you ever purchased a Kemper KSP1 that's just plain stainless?
Yeah, it's like more silver instead of like the black color.
It's not heat treated, like it's not tempered for longevity. It's like an econo tool. But a lot of the black headed tools have been put through a heat treat process that basically hardens them so that they don't wear away.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess that adds to the cost as well, like you mentioned, the cost and the longevity and everything like that. So it's just a higher quality tool.
I have a question.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
If you could only keep one section of the companies that you have, what would you keep?
I don't know. That's a loaded question.
Section, do you just mean tools versus clay?
Like clay,
that basic?
like clay, glazes, or tools. Let's do that. Clay, glazes, or tools. And we're not talking about money here, just like what you would want to like spend the rest of your life doing.
I don't know.
Why don't
She's
we say
lost for words.
We don't need to say rest of your life. What if we say the next 5 years? I don't know.
5 years.
I would do it. I would keep doing what I'm doing.
Well, I'm guessing there's pros. It's probably kind of like in the clay process. Like there's so many steps in the process. There's so many different modes that your brain is switching on and off as you're going in between. You go out one door into the other, the woodworking room, versus managing a team that's focused on technical and chemical stuff.
Yeah, I think I just like challenges.
Yeah.
I'm like sick in the head, so I like to overload myself, which isn't healthy.
Yeah. So do you have like a partner that manages, like is the manager for the tool section, and then somebody that is also like the studio manager for like the clays and mixing and stuff like that, and you just oversee them, or is it truly your hands are in every bucket pretty intensively?
No, I've gotten to the size where I have like a production manager and a general manager and a studio manager, somebody who every day will go in there and that's their job, is to manage a group of people that accomplish X, because the business has evolved into every facet of the industry. It's like we retail, we wholesale, we online store, we OEM, we private label, we consult, it's like, it's a lot. And I would say since COVID, we were down to like 3.5 people, and now we're like 20, literally. So I would say it's just sort of changed a lot. And that's because we started manufacturing clay and glaze in 2016. So that really added whole other divisions. Before it was buying and selling other people's stuff and then making Dirty Girls. So it was more size for a smaller group of people. But it's like you just kind of plateau, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to make a whole line of this kind of tool. Oh, I need people. Okay. You know what I mean? And you just kind of go.
Yeah.
That's how I have evolved as a business owner. Not everybody does that. I think it's just been because it's such a nano market. I mean, in the scope of the planet, it's big to us, but it's microscopic. That I've learned that you need to be able to weather all sorts of economic ups and downs. That's what 2008 taught me. I think that's why I started Dirty Girls is 2008 hit, and I was like, oh, we still have a lot of classes and people are still buying stuff and teachers still buying things. But I didn't realize that around here, all the budgets are decided a couple of years in advance. So 2010 hit, and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Purchase dried up. Teachers had $100 instead of $1,000. And I was like, I need to diversify to stabilize my cash flow for myself, for my employees, things like that. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I like every facet of ceramics, except when I don't get my order of truckload of EPK for 9 months. You know what I mean? So I just sort of my whole brain works in a you're always learning kind of way, and or trying to, and so I just translate that into more business stuff.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how you were saying how it's like microscopic, and I was thinking about that, like how you, especially being a woman in this industry, you are like one of the big clay people, and it must be cool to like go to NCECA and be like, fuck yeah.
I feel tiny though. I don't feel big. I feel like, what am I doing here? Everybody probably thinks I'm an idiot. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah. But then also like in the real world, like if you go to the supermarket and you say, oh, I own a clay store, it's like tiny compared to,
like coffee, like Starbucks, or like
right.
Or exactly. Or like every house and every building in the country has a toilet made out of the materials we buy. So imagine how many, sanitary ware, toilet sinks there are, and how many materials they need. Their industry is
right.
They drive the industry.
Like whole mines and stuff. They can afford to buy entire mines.
Yeah, exactly.
And have just one company can buy a whole thing. It's not like, oh, we've got to band together and get all these people on board to.
Hey, do you want to get a ton of clay? Who you want this? You want this? You want this? And they're like, oh, we'll have 49 years supply of this material. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh. I mean, there's a literal town named after Kohler. So like.
Yeah.
Fucking wild.
Yeah. It's weird. My sister was at an art fair in the Raleigh-Durham area a couple months ago, and she was like, went up to this booth with this young lady who had some nice pots, and she was like, oh, my sister makes pots, and have you ever heard of Dirty Girls Pottery Tools? Oh my God, yeah, I love their tools. And and my sister was like, my sister, started the company, invented those tools, and she was like, oh my God. And I was like, that sounds so weird, because I'm not like one of those who's like me. I don't. It's not called Link's anything.
Right.
It's a brand that doesn't have anything to do with me per se, personally, other than I'm like, I like this tool, let's make it. So it's kind of cool.
You don't have any wheels coming out called the Hendersons?
No, I did play around with the wheel for several years, but the amount of money you had to put into that, and this was pre-COVID, so it was probably a good idea that I was like, I don't think I'm gonna do this. For the technology that I wanted, I was gonna have to buy a humongous amount of things to make it work, and
the machinery must be outrageous.
or even working with another wheel manufacturer to make a branded wheel with different features. There's got to be room in the market. And if you're going to sell it direct, there's room. But I have like a network of dealers that if I really want to be able to, generate the quantity of sales that someone who would be making it for me needs to do it, then I would need to cut in dealers, which I'm fine with, but that would put a point a little too high. There's just a lot of ideas always, get tabled because you're just like, it's just not, I'm very much like, I'm going to manufacture in America with American made components and materials and steel and wood and things, not because of any kind of idea, but because I like to be as close as I can to my source, so I see Bob at so-and-so factory and say, hi, Bob, I need this. Where's my ship? You know what I mean? And it's not in the ocean. And those are choices that I made that a long time ago. And also I feel strongly about employing people,
yeah, I'm sure you could outsource your tool manufacturing and just have them ship it to you in a box and you can sell it and make more profit on it if you really wanted to.
Way more profit, but it's being made in a fashion that I don't morally agree with. So
yeah.
And I don't mean to sound like I'm pooping on people who do that.
They need that living in some places. Like they wouldn't have money to feed their family if they didn't have those jobs. So in some way it's kind of it goes multiple ways.
They don't have an OSHA or worker protections, and a lot of countries, not every country, but a lot of countries don't have that, and retirement systems and things like that that we require here. So
yeah, I would suspect during COVID that sourcing probably, I don't know if you thought that would but that also factored into being able to source your materials and keep the business going without relying on that.
I could get whatever I needed, basically.
Yeah.
One material, and that's because that business they couldn't find enough workers, but I had enough. I just had to call around more for it. But yeah, no, that was it. That I kind of looked around and was like, if people don't see that you either need to have a backup, or you need to be manufacturing, getting items from two sources, then, I can't help you because I saw this coming 1,000 years ago in my mind, not because I'm a genius, because when you're so small and you need all of your pennies and you want to support your people and yourself, then I've just decided to drive that ship in that direction.
Right.
And
so were there shifts that you made during COVID with, getting down to a staff of 3 and you had to figure out what you needed to keep and what needed to be priority or what needed to be shelved? Like, were there takeaways that you had that when you got back to quote unquote normal, you were okay, it's okay that we shelf that, and I wouldn't have made that decision without the kind of circumstance we were in, or maybe shifts that you had to do in the business, I didn't realize that we could lean that heavy into tools and there would be a market there to buy them. Were there shifts that you made that kind of came to a realization that you wouldn't have done intentionally?
I think it accelerated some decisions. We got a second clay machine because some places closed or didn't have materials or didn't have clay or didn't have clay maker. And we were fortunate, everybody's laws were different and everybody's attitudes were different. You know what I mean? It was a different time, it's a different place.
Yeah, rather than schools are not going to need clay for the next year and a half or whatever. So, if you rely heavily on schools ordering a ton a year or whatever.
That's when I came up with the flat rate thing for myself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the $25 flat rate box of clay.
Yes, and that is still one of the biggest things that we ship every day.
Can you explain it a little?
Yeah, it's basically allows any of the clays that we sell, our brand and the 3 other brands that we sell, Laguna, Standard, and High Water, anything we sell, there's a whole page you go to and there's a drop down and you can choose 25 pounds of that clay for a fixed rate and it shows up at your door. And you don't have to sit in the cart and go, do I want 2 bags and how much more is the shipping and back and forth. And so people in Montana pay the same price as the people in Kentucky. And it's really a good value up to a certain like 300 pounds, 400 pounds. Then you want to look into freight and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge portion of our business.
Was that a good financial decision initially, or was it okay, we're going to have to, like, it's going to be a little hit early, but if we get the volume that we expect, then it'll pay itself off and it'll exceed?
It was, we have to do everything we have to do. It was, we'll look at the map. COVID was very much like we're just going to stab everything and we're going to make it work. You know, we did a lot during COVID. It was mostly 50 pound and the USPS just murdered half of every shipment. So
So is it a specific box? Do you have to change the way that the bags are? Do you have are they bagged differently because you need to put them in that certain box?
My staff and I slapped probably 500,000 pounds of 25-pound bags of clay on the floor to reshape them for over a year.
Is that the medium flat rate box that's kind of like square, but it's only like 6 inches deep or 7 inches deep?
The 50-pound went into the large. Yeah. There was nothing about it that didn't suck except for we had jobs. So.
Because the machines are calculated to spit out a certain shape, and then, right?
Do what?
The machine is calculated. It's formulated to spit out a certain shape. So when you just change that shape, you've got to figure out ways to do it.
And everybody's pug is different size, and the pug nozzle is like $2,000. So it's, you know.
Wow.
Like, click on Amazon and be like, I want a new pug nozzle. Boop, you know.
So do you still smash it into the box, or is there a?
Yeah, a little bit, but like we do it. We went down to the medium flat rate, and then we got to deal with UPS. It goes into it. We just kind of drop it, and it's a lot easier. I mean, it's not like super easy, like doing nothing, but it is 100% manageable. In the summer, it's kind of brutal and hot.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting challenge. You're like, okay, these are the boxes we have to do. Like, is there an easier way to do this?
Yeah.
Well, at least the USPS is paying for the boxes.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I mean, during COVID, we were paying probably 2 people's salary every day in shipping. You know, I mean, it was just, but people needed clay, and there were only a couple of people people in the country who were shipping it. So I mean, I just remember and everybody was like, "Who's got clay?" And I was like, "I do." You know, and it also got our brand out in a very condensed period of time. So that was good because we would flat rate anything we sold, and we like all of the clays that we sell. But if we couldn't get it, like if we sold out of something and we couldn't get it, then it was like, well, I'll just try this or I'll just try that, you know.
Mm-hmm. So did you have a lot of folks ordering glazes as well? Were they leaning into more 10-pound dry? Because I know there was some sourcing issues with whether it's Amico or other glaze bottles that they couldn't source because of supply chain, and you all were like, well, we have powder, like you can mix your own. Or
yeah, there was a lot of that. And that some companies' lead times were really, really long, and you know, it was very much a feast or famine. I mean, as you know, it was insane.
Because you all had a lot of infrastructure to supply like direct to consumer. You didn't. Was the business before that? Was it as split between like distributor and
mostly like distributor, and the selling of our own stuff, manufacturing was smaller and growing, and then that began to eclipse you know.
I would guess as a business owner, you would prefer to be direct to consumer, or do you have a preference?
I like the blend. Um, you know, it's good to have a blend because like if you are going to go to your, like when you're in Colorado, Becca, and you're going to go into a pottery supply place, it's nice to see the same products that you see in Indiana. And so if I wholesale a portion of my business, then I've got some of those dollars as well as my local dollars. You know, Kentucky's only got 4,000 people, 4 million people or so in the state. It's not a large, you know, population. And so to just base your income on local sales is fine, but I wanted to grow, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in this area, you're kind of, people are probably willing to drive to you from, North Carolina and the East Coast if they had to, if they really like the product, because, maybe they got a 25-pound bag from you flat rate, and then they're like, oh, well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to order 500 pounds
Right.
and go directly to the shop.
Yeah. And I think a lot more of the larger, older clay companies, manufacturing companies that maybe only wholesaled have gotten more into retailing and offering a store, which I think is good. So.
Yeah.
So we already did. We already had like online store and all of that infrastructure was already there. So.
I feel like I got very blessed starting off in Washington because there's two clay suppliers in Washington, and they're both good. And
and they make their own products, so you have not just the same two people selling the same stuff.
Yeah,
you've got a lot of choices.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, like, I still drove 2 hours to get to it, like, to get what I wanted, but like, and then you go to some place like Indiana, and you're like, well, it's still pretty lucky in Indiana, but like, if I was anywhere else, it would be like, oh, I have to drive this amount of hours to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would guess in the middle of the country. I say middle, but like physically in the middle, it's probably pretty far. You're probably driving 4 hours at least to get to a supply store. I know. Yeah. Definitely lucky. I mean, it's nice. I get the stuff from Queen City because they wholesale from you all, and I'm like, well, like the cost is better. I would think it would be cheaper from Lexington at Mudworks directly, but I'm like, hey, that's how they decide to price it. I'm gonna get it here and save some time driving to and from and miles and all that.
Exactly.
So it's great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying some of those new clays that I haven't tried. I still have them. I'm getting into the soda firing and like trying the different clays is interesting, and it's a little experimental for me. So looking forward to that.
I'm trying new stuff. I'm always
like,
what does it look like? And I was like, well, today it looks like porcelain. Yesterday I was using red stoneware.
How are you all thinking about? How do you think about adding products and what you want? Because I know you've got like, I want to say Polar Bear is one of the newer clays. Like, how do you go about figuring out what is needed and what, like, is it customer feedback of where the need is, or?
We observe the market. I look around. I see, sometimes I'll see changes in clays that have been on the market for a long time. And I'm like, ugh, this used to be really good. I don't know what they did, but I don't love it anymore. And I'll be like, I think I can make a better version, and not just a better version, but like because that's the thing. When I started making clay, I was like, I specifically did not want to make the same, a version of everybody else's clay. Cause I was like, I wanted to make, more boutique, unique, different clays, because I wasn't gonna eclipse Laguna. I mean, like that wasn't even my business plan. They have 185,000 clay bodies, and it was more of a personal journey. It was like, I would like to know, I would just like to do this. I would like to experiment with this. And if I want to grow my business, doing this is, I wrote a whole business plan and this whole analysis and stuff. And just, oh, my brain just left.
You made
I
a whole
heard it.
business plan. You made a whole business plan about the clays and how you wanted to fit in the market and where the needs are, where the voids are that you're trying to fill.
As a distributor for the last, 20 years, I had people say, what about this or what about that? And then I would call and be like, hey, do you guys make a clay that's like this? And they're like, no, unless we can make a quadrillion pounds of it, we're not going to do it. And I was like, well, eventually I just was like, well, I'll just fill in the under quadrillion gap,
Right. That's what benefits you as a small business. You don't need to legitimize that you're going to sell X number of units because you need a clay mixer and.
Yeah. And I genuinely, of course, had no idea that it was going to work, except for I had been studying the market for a long, long time and had come up with, a smaller catalog than I have now, because we've obviously made a lot of plays of things that were not like anything I had tried. And I've been throwing pots since 1989, so I've been, I'm not just a business person who's like, I'm going to make clay,
Mm-hmm.
It was more of just like, how can I make this? How can
So
I make even more in love with this product?
Did you make your own clays back in the day, like that, like 1989 to 2000, like that time period, for your own use, or were you sampling and just bouncing around to different clay bodies and figuring out what?
I mean, I'm not that old. I was only like 13 in 1989.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, I didn't start experimenting with making clays until I did a little bit of it in college. But they basically were like, this is our studio body and this is what you get. And until I started Mudworks. And then I was, selling raw materials and I would just sort of put things together. And I had some recipes, from college that I had fiddle farted with. And then just kind of set a budget, like a little R&D budget.
Mm-hmm.
And like a tiny pug mill,
Yeah.
So.
Was there an OG clay body that's still around? Like, what are like the OG like 2 or 3 clay bodies that are like the staple of what started Kentucky Mudworks clay bodies?
They have evolved to definitely, I think, better clay bodies. But White Bear, Iceman, Mulholland, Big Turtle, basically the Cone 6 line. Speckled Turtle, White Lightning was very early.
Yeah.
We only release that occasionally now because I made a much better version called Coda.
Yeah.
So
that's the bag that you gave me to sample, so we'll see on the porcelain. That's a porcelain cone mid-range.
I mean, White Lightning's wonderful. It is. I mean, it's the most translucent clay I personally have ever gotten my hands on and seen fired at Cone 6. But it is very difficult. It's, it's like, with beauty.
It's porcelain.
It's yeah.
This last winter, me and porcelain have had a run in, and I would prefer never to work with it again.
But then one day you'll be like, I just saw these pots made out of porcelain at this show, and I'm in love. And then I'll just be like, oh my God. Then I'll make porcelain pots, and then 35% of them will just be trash, and I'll be like, I hate myself. And then
Is there a difference in making a Cone 6 porcelain versus a Cone 10 porcelain? Like, is it kind of pushing the boundary a little bit with making it mid-range?
Making any Cone 6 white clay is like running over your own foot, in my opinion. It's like really a bigger challenge than anybody can imagine. It's really to make a good vitreous Cone 6 white clay of any kind. But porcelain was actually way easier than white stoneware.
Oh, really?
Way easier. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question that is it's related, but it's not related. In a sense, I have some casting slip, okay? And I just moved out of my studio and I had them in bottles and I wanted them to be in bags. And so I like dried it down to almost a clay consistency. And obviously it's a little short. I'm not an idiot. I know it's going to be short. But why is it that short? Is it like missing what component is casting slip missing compared to like throwing clay? Is it bentonite?
No, it's more than that. It's definitely the plasticity, but it's like, so there's like 1,000 ball clays out there, and you're like, why do you need 1,000 ball clays? Because there are different particle sizes, different attitudes, different ways that they absorb water and sort of mesh with others. And some are made for fast casting, which means they're kind of larger particles, and so they shed water quickly. What you don't want when you're slip casting is just to make your mold saturated really fast. And so to make a casting slip, you start with larger particled ball clays, which are not as plastic. And you would leave out the bentonite. You might have some plasticizer because it's got to be somewhat plastic, but it's like a non-throwable version of a clay body.
Okay.
It's not just the bentonite. It has to do with the kaolins in there. And like you would sub out, if you had EPK in there, you would sub that out with, a larger particle, non-plastic kaolin, things like that. So
cool.
Do you all
I'm not
manufacture?
throwing with it, by the way. That's not.
Do you all manufacture Kentucky Mudworks casting slip right now?
We're working on it actually.
Okay.
A lot of people want, and I have a small amount of experience with casting slips, but I'm learning, so I feel like I can teach myself.
I don't know if it's just social media. It seems like casting is kind of growing. I don't know if it's just the process of, hey, this is just getting you to the canvas that you want quicker so you can spend your time doing what you want to be doing, or if it's making it easier to make molds because there's so many resources. I don't know, but
I never got into it because I personally don't like plaster. I don't like dealing with it. I don't like making molds. Is that you?
Becca's raising her hand.
I fucking hate plaster.
I hate it so much. Somebody's like, oh, hey, can you tell me how to make a mold? And I say, no, I need you tube and I will sell you the plaster. Because it's a level of, it's like woodworking. I do not like woodworking. I love woodwork products. It's not something I ever want to do because there's just no forgiveness. And I just want to be able to fix that little, you know what I mean? There's just something.
Yeah. If there's a crack in a piece of wood, you're like, well, we're fucked. Like.
But I love the science of slip casting. It's very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah. I know. I want to start making my jewelry pieces. Like, I have an idea, but it has to come from casting slip. And I'm like literally just thinking about making a box with a tiny slab inside. Just a mold of that's like a 1/4 inch high. Just thinking about that makes me want to just not do it at all.
Yeah. I start sweating. I'm like, what am I going to put it in? I got to put soap all over it. It's just, I don't know. Some people like that challenge and that works for them. And it just, for me, like if you were like, hey, here's a whole wall of molds, cast me some stuff, I'd be like, yes, I can do that for you. But if you were like, make me a mold, I'd be like, I cannot do that for you.
It feels like chess versus checkers or something.
I have a huge appreciation for people who do that because I look at 3 and 4 and 5 part molds and I'm like, oh my god, it's just.
I know.
Yeah.
The molds are almost just as, or more beautiful than the form that's made from them.
They're an art. They're an art form. It's.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe I can have Heidi make me a mold. Oh, fucking perfect.
Some people that do molds. Like, you could probably talk to Kurt. You could probably talk to Heidi.
I do. I just feel bad asking about it, but I can make Heidi help me. Because I'll be with her.
He ends up doing it for you. Yeah. Just kidding.
She might be hearing this right now. I don't know.
My plaster hand. I need your help. I can't do this.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the clay bodies and they've shifted since OG versions, but I know you've had to shift some with materials shortages and adjustments these days. Like, what kind of challenges have you all faced, that's a very broad question, but like what do you all have to analyze when it's like, okay, this clay body needs adjustment?
Mm-hmm.
First off, like, why do they need adjustment? I guess is maybe a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you go about figuring out what you need to fix it?
That is a broad question. I'm trying to think of how to start that. Obviously, when a material becomes obsolete or becomes priced out of the market or something like that, then you have to make an adjustment. So that's your hand is kind of forced in that way. And when I say priced out of the market, I don't mean like it went up 10% and we're trying to shave pennies, so we buy garbage materials and put them in. I mean like lithium or spodumene go up 1,000% overnight, or V-gum triples in cost. You know, there's reasons there that we don't necessarily get the 411 on. We just have it. So you go, well, okay, so that's going to make this pint of glaze $42 and nobody wants that. So we need to re-engineer the entire chemistry.
$42 up from what?
Like, you know what I mean? You know,
17
like,
to 42, yeah.
if you think about it, if you look around at some products that, you know, maybe have a lot of lithium in them, you know, and they're rather expensive. They're absolutely fabulously beautiful. Lithium is almost irreplaceably amazing material. But you just have to say, hey, like I don't have the call for my glazes in the volume that another company might have that's much, much bigger, that is like, well, we'll just have to adjust our prices. You know, I don't want it to just sit on the shelf, you know. So I make a stab at reformulating it.
Hey everybody, so we're taking a break from the episode today to talk about the newest plug-and fire kiln from L&L. It is a Cone 10 kiln and it runs on 120 volts. So you can plug this into any outlet. It's truly a plug-in anywhere kiln. We're looking forward to trying it out ourselves. It has all the greatest and best things about L&L that you can expect. So it's got the Genesis controller with the touchscreen, all that good stuff. It's got the element channels, so you know the ceramic things that hold in your elements so that they don't fall out. You don't have to worry about pins and all that good stuff. It's got a thermocouple, you know, the stainless steel case, and it's ready to go when you get it. So you can plug that into any 120 volt outlet. And the great thing about the power usage is it only runs on 12.5 amps. So it cannot trip a 15 amp breaker. So you can truly plug it into any outlet you're ready to plug it into, not worry about tripping a breaker. I've done that a time or two with my kiln, and you don't have to worry about that. So if you want to check out the specs for this kiln, the pricing, all that good stuff, you can go to hotkilns.com and see all the details. Thanks, everybody, and back to the episode. Is a lot of that just is there a single material, and then we can go to like, what did you have to change for that, like one material? Like, what if it's like EPK? Like, what was the reason EPK became where it is now? And then, like, how does that affect a clay and then maybe like a glaze that you had to formulate?
As far as EPK, it's not like some companies you'll get a letter, and some company you might get a letter that says, oh, this product that you've now been purchasing for a decade in 50-pound bags, we've decided to close that division and you can only have that material in a 2,000-pound super sack. And I'm like, okay, I don't have a super sack dispersing machine, which is $50,000 to $100,000 potentially.
I thought that was just a name for like buying a pallet. That's an actual machine.
Like a 4-foot high sack, 4x4x4 bag that they just blow 2,000 pounds of material into, and it makes it far less expensive. So there are definitely clay companies around here that buy, I know of a few on the East Coast that buy super sacks, and then you raise it up and you put it into a machine that dispenses it in the quantity that you need.
Whoa.
Instead of a 50-pound bag. Yeah. So that's probably 40%, 30 to 40% cheaper than my cost of buying it in a bag. So they're already saving money that way, but they also have, machinery that I don't have. So I've had companies send me a letter that says, sorry, you can't get that in a bag anymore. And I go, cool, great. Okay, cool. So
How
I
far
haven't
out
had
is this when you get that letter? Is that
that
like a 3-month thing?
that kind of letter is like, on this date we'll quit production, we'll make it. Yeah, and then I say, well, never mind, I'll just figure something out. Or I just go, oh my God, and I buy as much as I can afford, and I shove it in a container, and then that goes on the list, for us to reformulate. So that's happened. And so a lot of this, everybody thinks that, I don't know if everybody thinks this, but I thought this was how it was going to go, probably like everybody else. Okay, COVID has lightened up, things are back to normal. Okay, we've seen the worst of it. What I feel like we're seeing in our industry, and also like the wood industry, because I make products out of wood and plastic and metal, is the post-apocalyptic flip side of COVID, where companies are going, oh my God, that was horrible. We're going to change everything that we do now, or we're no longer going to make that line of products, or we're going to close that factory, or we're going to move this facility to another country. I mean, there's so much happening right now that I can't even tell you the list of it. But
So it's not a supply issue. It's it's not in their business. They don't want to put the business risk on the line to continue being on those like slight margins that maybe they had. And then they were like, oh shit, we're in the.
I think it's a blend of that. I think it's everything. I think it's everything. It's all of the scenarios. It depends on the business, and that's, what I've seen is like with EPK, for example, we didn't get a letter. I didn't get a letter. I also order a couple truckloads a year. I luckily didn't have any clay body that depended on it in a large percentage, magically. It was like peppered into 2 or 3 clay bodies, because it's kind of a clutch ingredient because of the particle size and its plasticity. So I just had to find a sub for that, but it was a small amount. But it's pretty clutch in glazes for suspension. But we've been able to find other things that work really well.
So like talc would have been a bigger hit for like the clay bodies and stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, I definitely, for sure. And that was the second talc mine to close in my shortish career. And I was kind of like, I'm over this. I'm not gonna. Part of what I learned through COVID was my business's supply chain solutions. I needed to really dial that in and get to where I had multiple tests done already. So if this company couldn't get me what I needed, I could achieve the exact same thing with this. Do you know what I'm saying? And
yeah. How do you know what ingredient to sub out though? Like how do you know what's at risk? Like, did you know talc was one that was like, oh, well, I guess you had the one mine closing in the past, so that might have given you more like, oh, what's to think that this won't happen again?
Yeah.
So it could be the talc, or it could be I mean, you can't
every recipe is different, so it's like, I'm not sure how to answer that.
It's kind of like which materials are more dominant in this recipe. So it's, hey, which one would really screw us over if this material was gone?
Yeah, like there's multiple companies that manufacture silica in America. So, but there's 500 different kaolins. So just maybe test more than you would test, the 2 or 3 that you normally see, and things like that, so that you can be a little more nimble. That's sort of what I learned. And then COVID also taught me to be a material hoarder. I was like, oh, okay, I can get this truckload. Can I get another one? Right after that, and just was sort of sitting on a lot of inventory material, which, is good and bad because you have a certain period of time that you can guarantee to manufacture your stuff. But then you also have a lot of cash sitting in a container. So there's
Right.
good and bad.
Do you think a lot of others like took a lot of supply and hoarded from that situation, and that caused some of the decision making of we're going to close this because, or
every business was different. Like at EPK, from what I understand, only because I looked at my bill and the email addresses that I was getting correspondence, I think they got purchased by another company that was like, I don't know. I don't know. I heard all kinds of things like, oh, this deposit was speckly, so we had to move all the machinery over to here, and that takes 2 weeks. And then they do have to dig up. It's like a byproduct of sand production, so the majority of their income is sand, and the EPK is just something they sell off. And I guess they just, I really don't know. Machine breaks. When it's that long and you talk to so many different people and you're a small fish, there were people who would get a truckload a week, and they basically didn't have any answers for me either. So
yeah, I have a question. I know we've said a few things, but can you like list off what products have become obsolete, like in the last couple of years, that have affected? Like, I mean, obviously EPK and talc.
Now, like I got my truckload, and some people are getting their truckloads, but it's not like you can just order it and they give you a time like like, hey, it'll be ready to pick up in 3 weeks, and it is like it used to be. So
Okay.
When I get a truckload, I put it in a container and I 4 pallets, and I keep the rest, and people are like, oh, you could mark it up, or you could, and I was like, but I'm not guaranteed to get it for another 9 months, and there are some recipes that we found, subs that were good, but there was just something about that EPK that was a little bit magical, and glaze suspending, mostly in glaze suspension. So.
And then talc was another one. I'm curious about Custer. I don't really know the story of the Custer feldspar situation.
From a lawyer, like everybody else, like a Dear John, from a law firm that said, hey, we're ceasing operations effective immediately. I'm pretty sure it said we aren't going to be fulfilling any in-house orders or accepting new orders. Or it was like any order placed before X date we can fulfill, and then it's done. And we hope to be able to fulfill your feldspar needs in the future. Like literally that was it.
Wow.
Yeah. So everybody was like, and what's going on? And I've heard, bankruptcy. I've heard, somebody could have gotten injured and OSHA came in and shut them down. You don't know. Usually when you get like a letter from a lawyer, it's something drastic. Like a couple years ago, maybe 21, 22, the Mulcoa Grog the control room caught on fire. And they enforced, it's called force majeure on a contract, which means, I'm not a lawyer, it pretty much means something real bad happened and we can't fulfill our contracts for you and you can't sue us. So it's like an act of God almost, kind of out gives, because there are people who had 3 and 4 truckloads a day of grog, and their entire factory, depends on that. And they're like, well, how are you going to compensate me, or whatever their contracts say. People like me don't have a contract with a grog company. I just buy grog,
Right.
when I need. And so there's just bigger things at play with that kind of thing. So I think every company's a little different. Custer, the letter made me feel a little hopeful, but I personally lost my professional shit for like a day. I'll be honest. I know this is like going out on the internet, and but I have been through, years of this kind of stuff. And I was like, I just kind of had like an internal temper tantrum, and then just a lot of expletives, and I was just like, I can't this
Yeah,
is
it just feels like such a stable thing. You're like you come to depend on. You're like there's no reason why. That's like you said silica. I'm like, why would silica go away? That's like in everything. Why would?
you turn on the tap and water comes out. Custard comes out of the custard faucet. I mean, it's been there since the dawn of American ceramics, I'm guessing. I don't know. I just know that it's in everything everywhere, and it's everybody's go-to. And so I just kind of had like I just can't do this again. I just can't. I just kind of I was like, this is a joke. This is a joke. This is a joke.
Mhm.
Would walk around to my staff and go, can you slap me? Because this is a joke. And I just can't. I can't do this. I can't do this again.
Yeah.
I can't do this. And then I was like, okay, let's do this. And so luckily I have an amazingly wonderful glaze tech, clay and glaze tech. And he and I, will just dig deep, and I'll be like, we got to do this. And he's like, I'm on it. And he loves doing it, and I love doing it, and it's a challenge. So
Yeah, I've heard some about like Indian feldspars that are potential replacements, and it's just like adjusting your expectations of, okay, it's going to cost more because you've got to import it versus having a local source, and maybe that it's just a mindset that, okay, we just have to be okay that it's going to cost a different amount.
like 50 to 80% more is the cost of I use G200 EU. I was already using it actually in several really white clays, porcelains, things like that. And so I had already had a supplier, and I already had a couple pallets, and as soon as that letter dropped, I was on the phone. I was like, I'm taking a container. I don't care how much it is.
Of G200 or of the custard that's left?
G200 of G200.
G200.
And they're like, okay.
That's where you're like, hey, I did my test. This is what I need to fall back on.
Take these clay bodies. I had some in my factory. I had 5 or 6 pallets, and I was like, take that. Let's make some, you know what I mean? And so we were like on it, but.
You must be very good in like stressful situations, because like the way you're talking about stuff like that kind of reminds me of me when something goes wrong with me, and I'm just like, cool.
Right. Cool. Yeah, my staff was going to listen to this, and they're going to be like, she's a lunatic. I curse a lot. I don't curse at people. I don't ever really feel the need to cuss anybody out. It's more just like I get my stress out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Like that way. And I'll just be in my office, and you can hear, in the break room and stuff. And I think it lightens the mood. It makes people understand that it's just is what it is. It's challenging.
Yeah. I'm so used to everything going wrong that when something goes wrong, I'm like, that was gonna happen. Yep.
Well, yeah, that's after my, temper tantrum of custard.
The temper tantrum is definitely needed, obviously.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna let myself do this. I'm gonna emotionally indulge in a temper tantrum. I was in a bad mood for like 2 days, and I told everybody, I was like, I'm in like a really bad mood. I'm like really angry at the world right now. I cannot be happy. I would just say it just like that. So, just so you know, if I look mad, it's not you. It's 100% me, because I'm just coping with it. And then when I got over it, I was like, all right, it is what it is.
So as you're making the changes to like a clay body, how do you, I want to say, like stress test it so that it's, you make a change, are you like letting customer know by the like batches, and you're like, hey, this is different, look out for, like, we want feedback. How do you kind of stress test it so what changes you're making at scale are going to work versus like, hey, this is a set in stone, this is where we're at, we're not going to make more changes?
So with glazes, we put like a new formula sticker on things, or we're like, hey, this doesn't exist anymore. Sorry, we haven't had time to reformulate, and we don't have a stock. Like, I just kind of was lucky-ish enough in these situations with EBK and Custer in particular. I happen to have just gotten a truckload of EPK, and I kind of hoarded it, and we used it in small amounts because of COVID. And then I kept waiting for my truckload, and they kept putting me off in months. And then everybody's talking about it. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to get this. So we need to conserve resources, And then with Custer, I had just gotten a truckload, and then I had ordered another truckload, and I got that. And then I needed another one, and they were like, here's your letter. And I was like, So I had enough in-house, and we basically rationed it so that it could last us X number of months.
Mm-hmm.
We just got, I think we just finished our last bit of Custer, because I was like, we're only going to make this many batches of this, and this many batches of this, and this many batches of this, so that everybody who needs a little bit of something, you know what I mean? So that it's not like we blew our whole truckload on one clay. And we're small, so
So is something like that, if it's a glaze, for instance, is that taking the 10-pound dry off the table and making it last long because you're going to fulfill more people with pints versus doing?
Yes. A few times we were like, so the sales for this are much higher quantity. We can help more people out by doing this versus
or limit how many people, you can't buy more than 2 10-pound bags at a time or something like that of this glaze. Or
we tried to get creative with a lot of that, so that everybody gets what they need as best they can. So for glazes, we have a stock of things, so we have enough to last, usually enough time for reformulation and in-house testing and things like that. And then we put a new formula sticker on. We usually put a note out on our Facebook Clay and Glaze group. There's been a blurb on the top of our website. If you click on it, it's a whole page. I haven't updated it since Custer, maybe. I can't remember. It's all kind of a blur, about things. Here's this is happening, and that kind of stuff. And then with clay bodies, usually the changes are so slight that, we have it in our records. So if somebody has a problem, then we can go, okay, that's when that batch started. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Because I remember there was some Iceman hiccups during certain times of the year, and you were telling me this is the batch number when you would expect it started to change. And some of that was just aesthetic changes, like the clay looked more gray at a period, and then it looked more like cream or something. And it's it throws a little different, or it dries quicker or something like that,
Yeah. And part of that's been over the last couple of years, we've been dialing in our vitrification on things, because there's just tons of talk about that on the internet, which I think is, people learning is great and experiment. But, and I can't speak for other clay manufacturers. I can only speak for myself, as both user of all my products and, and the of it. And we're the people who are fielding questions and calls, and we're seeing what people are making out of it and the problems they're having, and we're computing all of this information. That it's obviously wonderful if you can have a product that hits one spec at one moment in time that is what it should be. But then you put that product out, and we can do that in our lab, but then you put that product out to, 500,000, 1 million people, and you get different techniques, different kilns, different firing rates, different everything. There's no control. Do you know what I'm saying? From a scientific method.
Yeah, you can't plan for all the uses.
Yeah. So to say that, we try to have our clays hit a certain mark. We are happy with this workability, recyclability, look, feel, response with glazes from a user standpoint, with a product being in this vitrification range.
Right.
0 to some are 0.8. but that's because if somebody might buy my clay and take it to a community studio that fires 0.7. You see what I'm saying? And then they call me and say, well, your clay is garbage, it warped. And you know what I'm saying? So I think a lot of, I don't know what other companies with this is why we chose this vitrification, you know. I can only speak for myself, but I found that it needs to have a small amount of flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why you have different clay bodies. You have, I mean, most of them are in the 5 to 7 range, and I feel like on some of the boxes you even narrow that down. It doesn't. I don't know how many boxes you have these days that say 5 to 7 anymore. I feel like it's
6. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that people know that if you want 0.5% or less, go to 6. But there are a ton of people who email and say, but my glazes look good at 5. And I'm like, okay, but you need to accept that your clay isn't going to be this ideal vitrification that everybody says should be on the internet. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there's just, once you insert users, everything changes, you know?
Right. And then the studio, like a lot of people that get their pots back, they don't know what the firing temperature was taken to or what the result was. And you know, I don't know if the studio does unless they put witness cones in there or they really dial in their firings.
Exactly. And we dial ours in. I mean, we've put a cone in the top and bottom of every kiln, and we fire Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3, 10 cubic foot scuds. And, if it's like a half a cone off, we're like, oh my God, beep, 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 beep. We're trying to get a consistent product. But I know that that's not necessarily always what users are doing.
Well, maybe you should get an L&L.
Which I love. I like if the kiln works and it's easy to repair and it's good quality. I like it. I have an L&L that I got free that somebody was going to put in a dumpster, and I was like, oh, I'll convert that to 40 volt. Thank you very much.
I'll take that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think a big, I don't know how big the reach for Flux Lake podcast is, but I feel like that's been a ceramics materials workshop and just this talk about the chemistry and the testing and just like giving you the sources of information so that you know the next questions and the tests that you need to do next. And I hope that that's having an impact. I don't know how big the listenership is, but like I hope that, discussions like these, talking with you and other manufacturers that can make an impact and make changes and adjustments and like know where, because a lot of that you like hope that the science and the chemistry is taken care of for you and you don't have to worry about that stuff as the potter.
Right.
But you still have to have an idea of like what materials you're using.
Yeah.
Well, and like the responsibility doesn't come down to the clay maker at the end of the day. It's the potter. Mm-hmm. If you have a business and you're a potter, it's your fucking fault if something goes wrong. It's not Link's, unless.
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was like, unless it was like a firing issue, like you fired it perfectly and the clay fucked up. That's the only problem. But
or big nugget or something in the clay, or our responsibility is to make a consistent product that is, we test it. Hey, we fire a puck every glaze. Oh, but what batch is that? Boop, we have that batch. We tested it. It's good. This is what it needs to look like. Yours looks like this. You need it to be thicker. Maybe it doesn't work with that clay body. Things like that. We do a lot of that back and forth. Because again, that glaze is going out into America and there's, 400 clay bodies. There's no way anyone could ever test every clay on every glaze. It's just not possible.
Right. So is it, so you're doing that test are you talking clay body tests or are you talking glaze tests?
Both. Yeah. We make a puck of and we have buckets and buckets and buckets of them.
And it's a lot of that, visual test to be like, okay, we applied it the same. Here's how we always do it. Here's what it looks like from this other test. And here's, do you do like absorption tests and vitrification tests and stuff like that so that kind of get an idea? Okay. Is that a standard for a lot of companies to do that batch to batch, or is it just following a recipe and as long as the recipe's followed, it's?
I mean, I don't know. I never worked at another clay company. I just started one. I know it sounds crazy.
I
But
never thought of like, hey, how much volume of let's say you're doing the 10-pound bags of dry, like how many pounds are you doing of that glaze before it gets bagged?
like 1,000, and then we test that batch. So all 1,000 of that we know is good. And so the liquid that's made off of that we know is good because we then took the liquid and we painted that on the tile as well, And so we have something to back that up. And if we pull out a tile and we're like, yo, this is missing something, it just sits to the side and we don't sell it until we figure it out.
Sure.
So
That's a costly mistake, I'm sure.
yeah, it doesn't happen often because we have like checks and balances. Sheet of paper, somebody batches it, somebody check, somebody else check, So.
And is some of that, hey, what pallet was that raw material on that we used for this batch kind of thing? Because some bags of raw materials are different, right?
Yeah, or we'll order a material and we're like, hey, that's not the same brand we got last time. And they're not the same. Some things are like vastly different. And we're like, great, now we need to test this before we even use it. So, there's a lot of testing.
So what would cause a glaze to go out of commission completely? I'm thinking like Inferno Red, that's like the ancient copper glaze. Like is that just a decision point of this is going to be too costly, or is it just a material? Or is there multiple factors that is like, okay, we're done with this glaze. We got to figure out an alternative.
I don't know with ancient copper. I don't know. They don't tell me. But for us with Inferno, it was a material thing. It was just it's heavily dependent on a certain material that I'm not gonna tell you because it's my recipe. And
is my recipe.
My recipe. So it became unavailable, and I got tired. I could have found it from other manufacturers, but I was just like, I'm over this, 100% over this, because this is just gonna happen again. Mm-hmm. And so it's been shelved. But my glaze tech Will loves a challenge, so he is sort of like, he's always thinking and he's always testing. So he's like, it's not dead yet, and I was like, sweet.
Yeah.
So we have a new iron red. So it's not an Inferno, but it's just another beautiful iron red. So we kind of went down that trail. We accepted the challenge, and we're like, all right, let's see if we can come up with some other iron reds, and it's been kind of cool.
Yeah, because I think you came out with some like tomato reds. There's the Dragonfire and whatever that brand new one is. Or is Dragon's Breath
is related to Inferno, and then the new one is called Heirloom Red because it's kind of a tomato.
Heirloom Red, yeah. Oh, I like that name. I just got that. I saw the name when you all released the new recipes or the new glaze options, and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, we sat around the wood kiln and we were like, we got to come up with names, and that's kind of how we do it. We sit in a group and we just kind of blah, blah, and then we Google it, make sure nobody else has the same, because you don't want to have, unless it's like clear, because that's just,
right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So it's not completely out. It's potential coming back.
Not. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you should start naming clear and visible. Be different.
Good idea.
Invisible.
Ultra clear.
Ultra.
What makes it ultra?
Clearer than super clear. Yeah.
So
I need there to be like I want there to be a clear underglaze.
That's called clay.
I know, but
slip.
No. No, I want it. I can't remember why I wanted it.
So you want it to dry like matte? Is that you essentially want like a glaze, but you want it matte clear?
Matte clear, but actually clear. Because matte clear is not clear. Matte clear is not clear. It's just not. So, yeah, I was talking to somebody. I was like, I just need a fucking clear underglaze. And I can't remember why. There was like some reason why I wanted this, and it was a good reason. I just can't remember what it was.
You need to tell me when you remember it, because I'm trying to think of why, and I'm like,
It had something to do with my fancy pots.
mm-hmm.
And I think it was like painting on top of them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't. Oh, I know why. It was because, well, okay, so I use stroking coats and underglazes, and stroking coats act extraordinarily different on an underglaze than they do on regular clay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was why I wanted just like a clear underglaze so that I could do a base coat before applying. I think my cat just found a mouse. Before applying. Wait, say that again.
What underglaze are you using before the stroking coat? Like a speedball?
I typically use white. Yeah, speedball, like a white speedball. But I think that was why, because like I wanted to do maybe something that was a little bit more open, like transparent, and I needed the edge to be crisp. And in order for the edge to be crisp, I had to put an underglaze under it, and so I think that was why. Yeah.
Almost
but
like a stiffener or something that keeps the stroking coat from interacting with the white.
Yeah, exactly. And also it adds, like, it would be cool because it adds dimension without actually adding any color, which is kind of cool. But and you could do it at bisque instead of glaze.
Well, no, everything I can think of would be a flux. It was like, frit and water.
Right, it would be shiny.
Yeah. I was gonna say Gerst, that doesn't exist anymore. Oh, that's another one that just poof. Well, it didn't poof. Laguna basically just exhausted what they had. So.
Wow.
Gotta find those alternatives. Is there like a close enough? Because I don't really care super chemically, or do I really have to know all the chemistry to like do I care enough to get to that level? Or
if you're gonna make your own stuff, if you're not, you can depend on companies like us, and then just go with.
Yeah. I think there was a question on, and maybe it was a for Flux sake kind of related topic, and they were talking about like would clay companies ever consider releasing recipes or material lists of what goes into their clays and glazes to help the customers know what's in their products that they're buying?
What about a MDS sheet, like a materials safety data sheet? Doesn't have anything?
You can claim trade secret. And those don't list, they say like kaolin, fall clay. They don't say which. I saw that on your list of questions, and I was actually super tickled that I get to address this because
I was nervous to ask it because I saw it on here. I'm like, ooh, should I ask that? That feels a little pressing. But hey, we got you in the seat. So if you want to answer it or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, no, I thought about it all day actually. Because I listened to that podcast. I listened to it for Flux sake, and I enjoy it. And I've actually taken a couple of the CMW classes, and I've learned a lot. So mad respect, of course. But on this particular topic, and I'm going to explain from my point of view, that is when I heard that posed, I kind of like was driving, and I kind of like cackled and was like, expletive, never. And I'm I make things and I sell them, and that's how I make money. So I kind of liken it to if you call up Kraft Foods and you were like, hey, I eat Velveeta. I need to know what's in this. Tell me now. They're going to hang up on you. I mean, that's their intellectual property.
Right.
And that's how I pay my staff. That's how I contribute to their 401k. That's how I give them paid time off, is to have products that are the intellectual property of a company that nobody else has, that other people want to purchase. And I take that money and I provide. You know what I mean? I don't really know how else to say how lunatic I would be as a business owner if I did that. You know? Do you see that from my point of view?
Yeah, I mean, to a point, you're also, what percentage of the population is gonna like do something with this, as well as like who's to stop somewhere else that actually has the resources to replicate those glazes and take you out of business for that glaze. Like, I get it, there's not individual potters that are going to take you out of business because of that, but like the reasoning is, I think I can't remember exactly the reasoning explained. I think it was, we need to know what's in our materials because it's going to affect other things, and if we know the chemistry, then we know how to adjust from that. I want to say that was the reasoning that was given.
But
You know what?
isn't that
ahead.
the whole point of making your own glazes as opposed to buying commercial? Like, yeah.
Make your own. You want to know what's in them. And I absolutely think that's wonderful. It's not always possible for a lot of people. Say you live in an apartment in New York. You're not going to set up, you don't have a garage. You're not going to set up a glaze lab, you know? So you just have to make a choice. Am I just going to buy these things, or am I going to go rent somewhere and make a glaze lab and do this stuff? You know,
Yeah.
I want people to learn as much as I learn and keep learning and to know all these things. And I can only speak for myself. I don't know if other companies would be like, yeah, sure, here's the recipe for our biggest selling product, you know? Because then you could just take that recipe and get your local supply place to make it for you. You know, it's you know, there are potters out there who have proprietary processes that they don't share because it would be all over the internet and everybody's pots would look the same. You know,
Yeah.
just because you
Well,
buy
I think
your pots doesn't mean.
I think that also we kind of like, in the pottery world, we kind of forget that there's a reason patents exist. You know, like, the reason is because people can be awful and people can rip you off, and to assume that everybody's using the information for their own good instead of like their own benefit
100%.
Yeah,
Without
I mean,
doing work, without doing all of the work
yeah,
that I did to come up with the original Iceman, and all the money I spent and all the time, you know, people think, if you think I'd fit that into a 40-hour work week, it's a joke, you know.
Yeah.
It's just not how it works. In my
I wasn't
world.
Now I feel like I need to listen to this episode because I'm a little mad now.
I mean,
Well, I think it depends on the way you're framing it. Like, some of it makes it sound like, oh, we're doing this because we want the best materials and we want the most information possible. But you know, there's kind of a balance of, well, you have alternatives that you can go to if you don't want to use that product. There are alternatives, but like, I think some of it's also like, well, if you're going to use a clay that's range is 6 to 10, like, maybe avoid that clay or only fire it to the fully vitrified version, and don't try to like use it in the wrong way.
I agree completely, and I think, I mean, I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I'm tiny and I'm small, and I started doing what I'm doing for particular reasons. And part of that was to make more vitrified clays, you know, and because I wanted a better product for myself and for my customers. And I'm not saying that other people's products aren't great, you know, but you know, when you make a brand, you're like, this is the greatest thing in the world, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's your product. But I understand the genuine desire to know what you're working with. I kind of wonder if people wanting to know what's in companies' recipes is maybe some companies are more opaque and maybe they don't have the customer service interaction that customers want. I don't know. I can't speak for other people.
Is it like, hey, there's this issue and I'm seeing this and they feel like they're being like pushed to the side, like, oh, that's not really happening, or, oh, well.
I think be the case. I think, again, I'm not a giant clay company. It's very hard to just not. I'm guessing that there's just a volume of emails that some larger companies get, and they deal with the biggest ones, and the other ones might just kind of fall away and not get answered. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not here to poop on any clay companies at all.
And some of it can like slightly be rectified. Like if there's clays that there's a batches of weird stuff in the chunks in the clay when you're transitioning clay bodies, like that stuff can be rectified. You can replace the boxes, or you can like give them recommendations. Okay, you should just throw that out. We'll send you replacements, or like, there's ways to resolve it. But if you're saying like, I need to know the material in this because I need to know how it's affecting my clay specifically, is like, well, like that's the risk you take with all the products that are out there. We can't test every single option on the spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a demand, I think there's a demand for high quality. And I think if people don't feel like they're getting it, maybe that's when they want to know what's in it. I don't know, because I never would have been like, you need to tell me what's in this. That never would have occurred to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, I'm a customer. I was a customer. I'm still a customer of clay companies.
Mm-hmm.
I distribute clay and glaze companies.
And there's also this like giving of information. Like I don't know if it's changed over the last decade or so that we all expect that everybody's gonna be an open book about everything. So why do we not hold the same standard to these big companies? But it's like you're talking about, there's staff on the line, there's other people that rely on, and there's just so much at play.
That was my first reaction, was just imagining that my IP, my sweat and tears, my 20 years backbreaking sacrifice work, my, and the contributions of staff, the ideas they brought to the table that are part of all of it, would just go out there and be something people could just have.
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of like, that's a different side of the industry that I guess that's more of like an open source education side. And maybe I just wanted to present my standpoint is it's like, okay, then I can't necessarily count on a certain amount of income. So, wow, I might have to lay off 4 people. You know what I mean? Because now 4 editors have all my recipes,
Right.
And
it would almost have to be everybody would have to join in to give everything all at once. You can't, because otherwise you're being vulnerable if you.
And that's really not America. Let's just go there. That's not competitive capitalism. It's just not, Yeah. But I'm a capitalist with a conscience, 401k, matching, PTO. It took us a long time to get there. Health insurance, all of those things. And that costs money, and that money has to come from the things that we sell. And, having your own products that you can control, that was a big part of wanting to make my own products, is that I could control the quality as best as possible. How do
you protect yourself? How do you protect that intellectual property? Is it signing contracts with your employees so that, the glaze chemist doesn't leave and take those, take that recipe? Is it trademarking or patenting? Or
you can have NDAs, non-disclosures, but when something's out there, it's out there. It's really, and really you could sue somebody, but if they've got $17, where they just had a kid, you're gonna take their house, You just,
because all it takes is snapping a photo of something, or snapping a photo. What's that?
You trying to start something? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm just saying that's all it takes. I mean, how do you protect when you've
Yeah.
got staff and you've got people plugging and playing of like, you know, the limit would be like having one person always mixing all these glazes or like, you know, obfuscating it so you don't have the same people that know the same things, so they're mixing up something for some recipe that they don't know what it goes to, you know.
I don't know if people do that or if they just hedge their bets.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you just. Oh, you said you have to trust your people, and the people have to trust you. I mean, it's a two-way street. Like, you have to be good to your humans, and they're good to you.
Basically.
Yeah.
Because if you can't do that, I mean, for me, if I can't do that, what am I doing? You know, like I just don't live in a giant corporation world where you slice somebody's tires to get ahead. You know what I'm saying? It's, you know, if you don't do something that's what you would want people to do for you and to you and around you, then you don't want to do that. So.
Hey guys, so I just wanted to get on here and let you know that we're going to have a 2-part episode this time because Link's interview went for like 2 hours and 45 minutes. So we wanted to split it up into 2. What's great about that is that gives us a little bit of a cushion for getting episodes out on time and maybe being able to take a week off. So just so you know, come back next week and we can listen to the rest of the episode. And don't worry, I cut it off at the end of that topic. So I did a good job this time, guys. Anyway, yeah, we'll be here next week. Hope you listen then too. Okay, bye.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to another episode of Wheel Talk. This podcast is made possible through the contributions of all of our listeners who always ask us great questions, leave us reviews, and contact with us through social media. Thanks to all the fellow makers as well who take time to be interviewed and share about their lives and businesses.
And thank you to Ashley from Boldover Ceramics and Lindy from Lindy Garner Ceramics for their assistance on the Wheel Talk Podcast Instagram. You are invaluable. Thank you to everybody.